I want to start tonight's show by talking about a dangerous trend in the national discourse where we are no longer allowed to have political debates. We can't even have different opinions from those academic elites from our taxpayer-funded institutions and universities. If you dare deviate from an orthodox perspective, it's likely you'll be labelled a conspiracy theorist, a nutjob, or even a spreader of fake news. And it happened again this week. And the person who wielded those disparaging labels was the most powerful man in Australian politics. And of course, it always seems to be about the voice. And this time, it's about how long the Uluru Statement from the Heart really is.
I thank the Deputy Leader for continuing to ask questions about this conspiracy that's been out there for a long period of time, Mr. Speaker. Indeed, this conspiracy has been around a while. Mr. Speaker, this is absolute conspiracy and nonsense.
So is the Prime Minister correct about his claims? Is this document a fabrication, a fallacy, a forgery? Is it all just a conspiracy? Much like the rest of Albanese's comments on The Voice lately, this is another example of baseless blustering that ignores reality. The truth is, a document titled the Uluru Statement of the Heart exists, and that document is 26 pages long. I am holding it in my hands right now. It exists, and the level of dishonesty we have seen from those who disagree with reality has been extraordinary. It is clearly numbered sequentially, and despite claims that pages 2 onwards are just meeting notes, the document is formally formatted and clearly has contextual continuity with the first page. And you don't have to take my word for it. This is what one of the authors said about the document.
A very powerful part of the Uluru Statement from the Heart is that it isn't just the first, one-page statement. It's actually a very lengthy document of about 18 to 20 pages.
And that same author, Professor Megan Davis, was also quoted saying this: "The Uluru Statement is occasionally mistaken as merely a one-page document. In totality, it is closer to 18 pages and includes a lengthy narrative called Our Story." Now, notice the word includes, as in the other pages should be considered inclusive of the first page. She even mentioned the phrase Our Story as being inclusive of the Uluru Statement. And guess what? That's the subheading on page 2 of the document. Now, this person has since walked back, by our count, the 4 separate comments she made about this document being longer than one page. And for Peter Credlin, she had this to say to our Prime Minister.
Now, I'm all for alternative points of view, but you can't have alternative facts. And no one, least of all Prime Ministers, get to mislead the House.
Now, clearly what has happened here is that there are multiple documents that have been drafted about the Uluru Statement, and the more recent ones will have truncated the messaging to the words on page 1. And that's fine. The messaging from the Yes campaign wants Australians to focus on that, and that is their right. But it does not mean that we have to ignore reality and pretend that an earlier document that was much longer and fleshed out and a whole series of thoughts and ideas, pretend that it does not exist, particularly when it touches on notions such as reparations and sophisticated plans to keep pushing for radical changes far beyond what is being promoted with The Voice. For our political leaders and many in the media to dismiss a real document as fake is so deceptive and dishonest. The document gives us valuable insight into the thought process behind the words on page 1, and that is what good journalism is all about. Well, joining me this week on the panel is the Australian's media writer Sophie Ellsworth and PR Council Managing Director Christy McSweeney. Sophie, I want to go to you first. This has ended up being a massive story as opposed to, I guess, the words on the document, which are real. What did you make of the Prime Minister labelling this document a conspiracy theory?
Jack, I think it's really telling when you quote someone directly from the words that come out of their mouth, saying this is a lengthy document. It speaks for itself. And it seems that people involved with creating the Uluru Statement from the Heart are now trying to walk back comments that they have made previously. Peter Credlin has done some very detailed research on this, obtained the FOI, which shows it is 26 pages. I've read the 26 pages and I suggest others do the same because it's far more interesting of exactly what this voice referendum could mean if it succeeds, as opposed to the pretty one-pager, which is about 400 words, which all looks very wonderful. I think you need to dig deeper into the detail. And I think the Prime Minister did himself a great disservice by trying to totally discredit what Peter Credlin had made headlines here. So I think they're in real strife, the Yes campaign. They don't want people to know the real truth underneath this and what it will lead to, as you said, as reparations and so forth.
Yeah, well said. And Sophie, I think as well, the attacks on the journalists who are bringing these stories to light, they reminded me of another politician that's often in the media for the phrase fake news. Let's have a listen to this grab, and Christy will get your reaction to it.
We are fighting the fake news. It's fake, phony, fake.
Christy, fake news has been an idea, a notion, which I think has been hijacked by the left. Ironically, Albo is sounding a little bit Trumpian, attacking the media for these legitimate reports.
Trying to play significant semantics, and Peter Credlin has done some incredible analysis. And as we say in PR and as we say in politics, you don't have to make up people's words. They're often damning themselves with their own words. And a number of those orations, press conference statements, conference transcripts that have come forward from people saying in their own words, in their own voice, that this statement is the full 26 pages. Even the Australian government bureaucracy has provided it so until they got direction from the government, we feel, to backtrack on what their version of it was. But rest assured, you know, when you're in public life and public debate, people can't be so naive to believe, particularly in this media environment, that their own words will not come back to haunt them. And people wanting to participate in such a significant campaign have to stand by their truth. And as we know, this voice referendum is all about voice, treaty and truth. And a lot of people have had their own words quoted back to them. And I will say one more point, Jack, that in terms of people having their words quoted back to them in public life, every single politician, I guarantee you, on the Labor Party front bench has at one time or another said, I'm not going to be able to tell you how I'm going to vote. I haven't yet seen the legislation.
And Sophie, there's no suggestion that the words in this document have been fabricated or they're forged. There is this attempt to separate it. But what's interesting is, by the author's own admission, this is the thought process behind the words on page one. So the attempt to conflate it with some kind of conspiracy, again, it shows to me an attempt to not only not give detail to the Australian public, but when a journalist presents that detail and shows you this sophisticated plan, it's just disparaged. I find it completely appalling.
Jack, when we as journalists get information, often you get a press pack, you get a press release at the front, which is all very positive and wonderful, and then you get a report behind it. So you get two elements here. This is the way I'm seeing this. The Uluru Statement from the Heart, let's for argument's sake say it is one page, whatever, but then there's all this information behind it. Do we simply throw the information behind it, whether it's in this actual one document or not? They can fight over that. No, you don't throw out the other 20-odd pages. You read that as well. And that's where the key to this Uluru Statement from the Heart and what they want, what the people pushing for this want, and you must read it. I urge all Australians to read it. And I think it's incredibly naive for the Yes camp to basically say, no, just look at one page, 400 words with pretty colours, focus on that. I think this is where they're getting themselves into a lot of trouble, and that's why you're seeing them try and walk back, as Christy said, their own words that have come back to bite them. They came from their mouths on this, and they said them themselves.
Yeah, exactly, and they've changed their mind. I wonder what kind of political pressure went into that. I guess we won't know. But look, let's move on, because now to the ABC, which has decided to close a raft of its Twitter pages to limit exposure their journalists have on the platform. David Anderson says the ABC will abandon the majority of Twitter accounts. Mr. Anderson said the reduced activity will allow staff to focus on the accounts that overwhelmingly provide the most value. The vast majority of the ABC's social media audience is located on official sites on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, with TikTok forecast to have the strongest growth over the next 4 years. The ABC also blamed so-called toxic interactions on Twitter for the closures, which prompted this rebuke from the billionaire owner Elon Musk. Well, of course they prefer censorship-friendly social media. The Australian public does not. Now, a very interesting part of this decision is the fact that the ABC has issues with Twitter's safety and trust teams. So instead of Twitter, it wants to direct more resources to TikTok, an app which just received scathing commentary from a Senate inquiry investigating foreign interference through social media. The inquiry wants TikTok to be broken up and sold off because it has found that the risks to our democracy are so grave if TikTok stays a subsidiary of Chinese parent company ByteDance. But at the ABC, they don't care about that. Instead, this is the type of garbage the ABC is publishing instead of news.
Just having our dinner. Whoa! That was a massive sprawling. Right. Are cats scared of cucumbers? Let's get to the bottom of it. Now, there's some conjecture out there that a long, thin thing could be like a predator, it could be a lizard, it could be a snake. What you got to imagine is that they're like a superhero on 4 legs.
Now, on Twitter instead, the ABC actually has a very professional news output. They are legitimately producing content which is news and designed to inform Australians. Compare that to the silly memes about cats jumping at cucumbers, and you can see what is happening. The ABC is chasing cheap views instead of performing its core function, to report on the news and get that news to as many Australians as possible. Instead, we are seeing a dumbing down social media strategy and cuts to important radio bulletins and the more traditional media. Even the most strident supporter of the ABC should be disappointed with this approach. Sophie, you've been reporting on the ABC for a long time, so you are across this digital transformation they're attempting to do. As I mentioned just before in the editorial, the TikTok strategy appears to be far more childish and more jovial compared to the rest of the strategy.
Jack, first, I didn't know cats were scared of cucumbers, so I did learn something in that video. I don't know where on earth you do find these, but this is the content that the taxpayer-funded organisation you and I and the viewers pay $1.1 billion to a year. They seem to have oodles of money that they can spend on this kind of trivial content. But it is interesting that David Anderson said they're going to shift away from Twitter, or X as we now call it, and move on to platforms such as TikTok, which we know there's been serious safety concerns about what information they are harvesting from users, including here in Australia. I find that really interesting that he's trying to divert resources to there. And as you said, what news value is this delivering? We want news and information, not trivial rubbish. And that's where you find on TikTok a lot of it is trivial rubbish. And because they don't have to make any revenue or money, they can spend resources on this. So I think it was interesting that Elon Musk also took a swipe, basically accusing them of liking censorship, friendly social media outlets. So that was a big swipe from him. Let's see if this whole plan will work for the ABC. Time will tell, Jack.
Yeah, and Christy, what are your thoughts?
Look, Twitter to some journalists, particularly from the ABC, is what Instagram is to a D-list bikini model. They are sitting there counting the likes on the content that they are putting up, hoping that someone will slide into their DMs and give them a story that they have to do no work on. So I don't have it. I'm a blonde Conservative who is involved in the Liberal Party. There's enough people in public life who want to abuse me. I don't need to accelerate or expand that pool of people with Twitter. And reporting these days is simply 2 lines of an event occurring and then a regurgitation of Twitter material, which of course is Twitter material aligned to the people within your own group think that the algorithm tells you that that's the material you get. So it's not necessarily a platform that provides objective viewpoints for people to use as a reporting tool either.
Yeah, well said.